if you want to know yourself as the light, you couldn't experience yourself as the light if you were a candle in the sun, because you're there with a billion cajillion other candles. You would have to literally surround yourself with what you would call the darkness. Then you could experience yourself as the light in the space of that which you are not. Therefore, as all masters have told us, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well.
Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Christina Aroche
and Luisa Vélez, and today we have the pleasure of talking to one of my favorite authors, Neale Donald Walsch. He is an author best known for his series of books, Conversations with God, and he has touched millions of people in a very meaningful way with his connection to spirituality and the divine. So we hope you enjoy as much as we did. Let's dive in.
Welcome, Neale. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with the both of you. How may I serve you?
Well, thank you so much. You've been serving us for so many years. For someone like me who has been following your work for so long, it's been such a source of wisdom, and in that upward spiral where we're always learning, depending on where we're at on our journey. I think I always find something new and interesting in your work. So it's such an honor to have you today. But maybe for those new to your work, can you maybe take us back to that moment in your life when you started having conversations with God and how that began and what was going on in your life at that time?
Well, honestly, Louisa, my life was falling apart. I had lost my relationship with my significant other. I'm grateful that it wasn't, an angry departure. We just kind of gently agreed with each other that it wasn't working as well as we had hoped. So we agreed to part company. But I didn't want the relationship to end. We shared 2 children together, and it was very sad for me. But 5 days later, I lost my job. The corporation I was working for had downsized. They needed to lose some overhead, and I was the last person they hired. So last person in, first person out. I had no seniority. So I lost my relationship and I lost my job in the same 5-day period. But wait a minute. The world wasn't done with me yet. I'm driving down the highway to my next appointment for a job interview. I'm certain I'm going to get the job because my boss gave me a glowing letter of recommendation. But an old gentleman turned left in front of me. He misjudged the distance between our 2 cars, and he smashed right into the driver's side of my car.
Oh my goodness.
My car was totaled, and I wound up with a broken neck. They rushed me to the hospital, and I didn't have, a hairline fracture. I recall the wording on the medical report to this day. It said that I had suffered a 3/4 inch avulsion fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae posteriorly. A 3/4 inch break in your neck is big enough to put a pencil through.
Wow.
And the doctor looked at me when I came to in the hospital, and he said, most people who suffer that big of a break in their neck die because of spinal cord complications. And if they don't die, the few who survive wind up being paralyzed from the neck down. You have had neither outcome. So, Mr. Walsch, what do you intend to do with the rest of your life?
Wow.
And he wasn't joking. He was, I almost want to use the terrible phrase, he was dead serious. So, I wound up going back to my apartment, but they put me in what they call a Philadelphia collar, which is a plastic device that holds your head up. And I had to wear it for like a year and a half in order for my neck to refuse, because they didn't want to go in there and put an artificial filler in. So I said, okay, but you know what? No one would hire me. I was going to one job interview after the other. And finally, the seventh person that was interviewing me, this man said to me, Mr. Walsh, I got to be honest with you. Nobody's going to hire you while you're wearing that therapeutic device around your neck. We're clear that you're handicapped right now, and one wrong move on the job, and we're going to be paying your medical bills for the next 10 years. We can't, nobody's going to hire you until you come back to us in one piece. He said, you come back to us as a healthy person, totally healed, and we'd hire you in 30 seconds. So I couldn't get a job anywhere. I finally ran out of my savings. I couldn't pay the rent on my little studio apartment anymore. I got evicted, and I didn't know where to go. I had nowhere to go. I wound up living on the street. I had nowhere to go. I didn't want to go back to my former wife. So I wound up living on the sidewalk for a year, not for a couple of bad weeks or a tough month or two. I was out there on the sidewalk for 1 year of my life, 2 weeks shy of 1 year to be exact. I was counting the weeks. Going from person to person with your hand out, saying if you could spare anything, even a few coins, please, whatever you might have. By the way, while I'm thinking about this, please don't ever pass anybody on the street who needs a little hand. Even if you only give them a few quarters or a couple of $50 or a little bit of paper money, don't pass anybody on the sidewalk who's clearly living on the street, begging for whatever they can get. Anyway, after a year, I finally got off the sidewalk and I found a little part-time job somewhere. I was still wearing the collar, but some man hired me as a fill-in, as a weekend person that could fill in for his full-time employees who wanted weekends off. So I got a weekend job, making just barely enough money to afford a little one-room apartment above somebody's garage. And but guess what? It had a bathroom. Because you don't really, who thinks about this? I didn't think about stuff like this until I was living on the sidewalk. Where do you use the bathroom? You have to sneak into restaurants and see if you can get in and get out before the manager asks you to leave, because you're clearly a street person. You haven't had a haircut in 4 months. You smell terrible. You're wearing the same clothes you've worn for weeks because you can't get your clothes clean. And the managers, if they would see you, would say, no, don't let me call the police. Please just leave. I said, please let me just, I couldn't even get my sentence out. The manager would say, we don't want you panhandling our guests. And I would have to beg them, please, I just need to use the bathroom. Please, one human being to another, just let me use the toilet. I'll be out of here in 5 minutes. Finally, one guy who was the manager of a fast food McDonald's place, he said, all right, I'll make you a deal. You promise me, man to man, pal to pal, that you'll never ask anybody for a nickel, not even if you meet a few guys in the bathroom. Just lay off. Give me your word of honor. And you can use the bathroom in here whenever you need to. Luxury. So I kept my word and he kept his word. But when I finally was able to earn a few dollars and had my own little place, the luxury of my life was a bathroom and a shower. I could go in and take a shower whenever I needed to. So I sat down one morning at 4:23 in the morning. I woke up in the middle of the night, angry with God. And there happened to be a yellow legal pad, on the coffee table, just a tablet. And I wrote an angry letter. Dear God, what do you want from me? What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? And I can recall writing Tell me the rules. I'll play this silly game. Just tell me the rules. And that's when I heard the voice, wonderful voice that said, Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions? Or are you just venting? I said, I am venting, but if you'd like to know, the answers I'd sure as hell. I mean, if you have the answers, I'd sure as hell like to know what they are. And the voice said back to me, you know what, Neale, you are sure as hell about a lot of things, but wouldn't you rather be sure as heaven? And I'm thinking, okay, what's that supposed to mean? And the voice said, take down everything I'm telling you. So I wrote down the answers to the questions that I was asking. And after I got those answers, I started asking other questions. I thought, well, as long as I've got such an open channel. So I asked about everything: parenting, right livelihood, dieting, health questions, questions about sexuality, about human relationships. I asked every question I could think of. And I wound up with this on paper dialogue. Now, guys, I never thought for a minute that anyone else would ever see this. This was a very private, sacred experience that I was having. I wasn't trying to write a book. I never thought anyone would ever be privy to what I was experiencing. But then I was told in the dialogue, Neale, you will make of this one day a book, and it will be accessed by many people. And you know what I thought? That's not going to happen. No publishing company is going to put a book out because a guy claims that God is talking to him. Come on. So I sent it to 2 or 3 publishers, my handwritten notes. I mean, I had them Xeroxed and folded up into an envelope, and I sent them to 2 or 3 small publishers just to see what would happen. I was daring God. Okay, you said it'll turn into a book. Show me. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a small publishing house on the East Coast of the United States. And they said, we want to publish your book. We love the material. We have your handwritten notes here, and we're going to put it into a book. I said, you're kidding me. Really? When the guy says, oh, yeah, it's a great work of fiction about a guy who has an angry conversation with God. I said, whoa, wait a minute. You're not publishing it as a work of fiction. And the publisher said, Mr. Walsch, are you trying to tell me this actually happened to you? You think that this is actually going on? I said, yeah, that's why I sent it to you. He said, okay, well, we'll put it out. We like the material. We'll put it out. But as a nonfiction book, you're not going to find 500 readers, because people aren't going to buy a book because some guy up in Oregon claims that God is talking to him. And you know what? He was right. It didn't find 500 readers. It found 5 million. Not bragging, just saying. So ever since then, I began believing everything that I was being told by God in the dialogue. Because I thought if that could happen, anything can happen. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh, I love that so much, and just the power of leaning into the guidance that comes through, and it's that full surrender, I feel like, in that moment of surrendering to what came through and surrendering to the guidance, and actually listening. And I think that's an important question for everyone, because one of the things that you talk about is how God talks to everyone, and it's not really about who is God talking to, but who is actually listening. So when it comes to listening, how did you learn to listen, and what do you recommend for those listeners out here today who are listening to this episode? how they can become more attuned to actually listening to the voice of God?
It wasn't something that I learned. You asked me, how did I learn how to do that? It wasn't something that I learned. It was just happening. I was just hearing this voice. So I didn't have to learn how to do it. I just listened. But now other people have asked me, can we have our own conversations with God? And the answer is, of course, yes. And I actually produced a book on that subject because I was asked by a publisher. A publisher actually called me. This rarely happens. Normally, authors write books, they try to find a publisher. But in this case, a publisher called my home. They found my phone number somewhere, and they called me. And they said, would you be willing to write a book for us? I said, what did you have in mind? They said, we'd like you to write a book that talks about how people can have their own conversations with God. So I said, well, okay, I can try. I never thought about that, as a book, but I'll do my best. And when I started writing it, I realized there was kind of a short little 6-step process that I was going through. That when I ultimately continued to have my conversations with God over a period of many, many, many months. So the first step in that process is possibility. We have to agree with ourselves that it's even possible to have a conversation with God, because most people would think it's a wild idea and it doesn't happen. The second step is worthiness, because even if we think it is possible to have a conversation with God, most people would say, yeah, but you got to be the Pope or the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Chief Ulama or the head rabbi or somebody with some sacred credentials. God isn't going to talk to the first baseman for the New York Yankees. Come on, much less you, Neale. So I had to accept my worthiness and agree with myself that all of us are worthy to have a conversation with God, which took me to step number 3, which was willingness, because then I had to be willing to overcome the cultural bias that our society has, because our society tells us, oh, come on. People don't have conversations with God. I mean, who are you kidding? Who are you trying to fool? And even our religions tell us, if you think you're having a conversation with God, that God is talking to you or through you, you're committing blasphemy. That's an apostasy. You're a heretic. So we have to be willing to overcome the cultural bias against conversations with God, which takes us to step 4, which is wakefulness. Once we're willing to receive those communications, we have to stay awake, because God's communications come to us in many ways, not just in, words that appear or were heard of in our mind, but feelings that overcome us, coincidences that occur, a billboard that we happen to see as we're driving along the highway, and there are 12 words on the billboard that actually answer a question we've been asking ourselves for 2 weeks. So there are many, many, many ways that God speaks to us. And we give it different names. We call it, a coincidence or serendipity or a chance occurrence, or maybe, an epiphany. And sometimes we even call it women's intuition. Whatever we can get away with, because we do want to say to other people, I just had a conversation with God this morning, because we don't want to be ridiculed or marginalized. But step number 4, stay awake, because God's messages are coming to us in 100 different ways. Let me give you an example. I've been in a coffee shop a few years ago, and I'm having some challenges in my relationship at the time. Well, the next relationship that I got into after my marriage failed. And I thought, golly, I'm always having a problem in relationship. What am I doing wrong? And believe it or not, there was a couple at the table right next to me in the coffee shop. And they were having, I wouldn't say it was an argument, but they were having a pretty intense discussion about some challenges they were facing in relationship. The same challenges I was facing. And I thought, is this a coincidence or what? Because they were coming to an agreement with each other on how they could move through these challenges. And I thought, well, my golly, this is unbelievable. So that's just one of many ways that God communicates to us. I'm going to give you another example so that people can understand what I'm talking about. I'm in the menswear department of a clothing store once, years ago, and I'm looking for a new sport jacket that I wanted to buy, but I'm smelling gardenia. I'm smelling the fragrance of gardenia. So I said to the salesman, is the department store perfume department, the fragrance counter nearby? He said, no, it's on the floor below us. I said, oh, that's funny because I'm smelling gardenia. He said, I don't smell anything. I said, well, okay. And then I realized, wait a minute. Gardenia was my mother's signature fragrance. She bought gardenia perfume all of her life. I got to call my mom. So I went home and I called my mother. It's not like I was talking to my mom every other week. I mean, I was a 47-year-old man. And, so actually, I was in my 50s. So I'm thinking, wow. So my mom and I had a very, very important conversation. It turned out it was a very meaningful father-son exchange with an older lady and a man who was in his 50s. The kind of talk you don't normally have with your parents until you're old enough to understand what it's like to be a parent yourself. It was one of the most meaningful conversations my mom and I ever had. But guys, 2 weeks later, she died. What is that about? Why am I smelling gardenia in the menswear department of a department store? So I want to just say that God communicates with us in 100 different ways across 1,000 moments in 1,000,000 lifetimes, including, for that matter, listening to a podcast produced by two gorgeous women. And people are listening to it going, oh my God, this is a communication right here about how God communicates with all of us. Now, I could be wrong about all of this, but I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Think so either. And we talk a lot about that. A couple of our most recent episodes talk about that precisely, and communication with the divine, with angels particularly, but the divine. And I really liked something you mentioned in your book, about how we can sometimes fall into this trap where, yes, God finds a way to talk to us however we're willing to listen, and he'll create the conditions for us to stumble upon a post, to perceive a scent, to have a meaningful conversation, all those things. But also we can fall into the trap of just everything's a sign. And so how do we discern when this communication is coming from?
Yeah, that's the sixth step in my little process. It's the process of the discernment. We have to just kind of like, and the example that I use when I'm talking to an audience, I said, you're on your way to the car in the parking lot, and you're reaching into your handbag or reaching into your pocket to get your keys out, and some paper money happens to fall on the ground. It's a sign. God wants me to throw all my money on the ground. No, I don't think so. It was an accident, Neale. Cut it out. Discernment. So I've learned that God's communications are always demonstrations and expressions of freedom, joy, expansiveness and love.
Absolutely. I refer to that for me is whenever I feel the expansiveness, and if something just makes me smile, I just, there's just a different intuitive knowing when it is kind of coming from divine, or it's just in your head and it's ego. I wanted to ask you, over the years, because you've been doing for this for a very long time, how has your relationship with God evolve, and do these conversations still happening the same way? Do you still, is it a voice that you hear, or it's a combination of many different things, but has it evolved and changed over the years?
Well, it's words that I receive, I would say, because I've been, I've been doing a lot of writing in the past 30 years. I've written 41 books. And I'm writing every day on the internet, and people are asking me questions all the time in writing, journalists and so forth, in magazines. And so I find myself doing a lot of writing almost every day. Even on just answering questions on my Facebook page is one example. So how I receive these communications now is words that just come to me. A sentence that just comes to me out of thin air. For instance, a few months ago, I was told, I was writing an article, and I was told that God's most important message to the world could be put into 5 words. You've got me all wrong. So then, of course, I asked God, okay, what do we have wrong? And God said, tell the world, Neale, tell your readers that God's relationship with humanity is not a transaction. It's not like a trade deal between nations. It's not a quid pro quo, this for that, you do this and I'll do that. I don't have that kind of relationship with human beings or with any sentient being in the cosmos. My relationship is a relationship of pure love. You don't need to give me anything in order to get what you want from me. I said, but you gave us commandments. We're supposed to obey the commandments or you don't go to heaven. God said, sweetheart, you made that all up. I didn't command anyone. I don't demand anything. I don't require anything any more than you would require anything from a 2-year-old child. And most human beings are acting like 2-year-olds. So I totally understand why you behave the way you do. I understand that your species is involved in a process called evolution. I know that. And there are other species throughout the universe that have evolved further than the human race. They're highly evolved beings. And they're not acting like 2-year-olds anymore. But you on the earth are still acting that way. You know what, Louisa, not many people know this, but we've had armed conflict on this planet for all but 5% of recorded history. Every year, every month, somebody is killing somebody. And I don't mean like robbers or murder. I mean armies, military action has been going on this planet for all but 5% of history. We don't even know how to get along with each other. Can't we just stop it? Can't we just stop it? What does it take for us to grow up and find a way to disagree agreeably?
That's that's one of the most, yeah, that's one of the big questions
Yeah.
of
I was
life.
gonna, yeah, I was gonna say that's the big question, isn't it?
Um,
Yeah.
and you even examined some of that in one of your books. Can't remember one, two, or
It,
three, about the nature of
it,
good, evil, and what God said to you about that, and why we needed that contrast.
well, we don't need that contrast here on Earth. We simply need to have a memory of it, an awareness of it, an awareness of that, where there's light, there's dark, where there's big, there's small, where there's fast, there's slow. Because if we don't have a contrast, then we can't experience any aspect of ourselves that we want to experience. God explained this to me very simply, Neale. It's really very easy to understand. And so the example she used, she said, supposing that you want to experience that you're 6 feet tall. I said, well, I'm 6 feet tall. God said, I know that. But if you want to experience what it's like to be 6 feet tall, you couldn't do it if you lived in a world where every blade of grass, every tree, every flower, every dog, every horse, every person, every where everything was tall. If you lived in 6 foot tall world, you could know that you and everything else was 6 feet. You could know what it's like to be 6 feet tall because there was nothing that was not 6 feet tall. Or to use a better example, if you want to know yourself as the light, you couldn't experience yourself as the light if you were a candle in the sun, because you're there with a billion cajillion other candles. You would have to literally surround yourself with what you would call the darkness. Then you could experience yourself as the light in the space of that which you are not. Therefore, as all masters have told us, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. It's really quite simple.
Mm, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. I love that. And it reminds me of something else that you shared that I really loved, which was talking about how we are one with God or one with the divine, but we are not the same as the divine. And you shared the example with the ocean and the wave. And I was wondering if you could share that again for our listeners to explain that concept, because that was something that you had shared. And I was like, same as what you just said previous to this. And I was like, oh, I feel that. This is beautiful.
Yes, well, I was told that we are all individuations of divinity. And, when I share that in front of an audience, often somebody stands up in the back of the room and says, oh, Mr. Walsh, come on. We've been listening to you for 20 minutes for you to tell us that you're an individuation of divinity. You try to say that you're God. And I have to say, no, I didn't say that. I said that I'm an individuation of divinity. And when I asked God about this, I said, God, can you explain that to me? She said, Neale, it's very simple. You are to God as a wave is to the ocean. The wave is not the ocean. It's not separate from the ocean. It's not something other than the ocean. It's simply the ocean in individuated form. A wave is an arising in a beautiful, glorious form, in a majestic form. It's an arising of the ocean. And when that individual expression is complete, the wave recedes back into the ocean whence it came, even as you will receive back into the ocean of divinity when your expression is complete. So that's been my understanding. I could, of course, be wrong about all of this, but I don't think so.
No, and I think that's the thing, right? When we're hearing these words and listening to these truths, I feel like we know what truth is because of the resonance and how it feels. I mean, everything that you've been sharing to me in my body and especially in my heart, it feels, I feel it. And it's even hard to put into words for me, that experience. But I think that's how you know it's truth. And I'm curious if you've had any other sort of indications that you know it's truth, but that's how it shows up for me.
Well, that's my first indication. It's the same as yours. It just feels inside like ultimate reality. It just feels, if I want to say, I hate to be so simplistic, but it just feels right. It feels right. But then my second indication is I look at the outside world. I look at, the experiences of people and the space around me, and I see evidence everywhere I look that what I've been told is in fact what's true. So I pay attention to that. And I realize that I can't think of a single thing that I was told in the 3,000 pages of the Conversations with God dialogue, which stretches across 9 individual books. I can't think of a single statement that hasn't been verified by my observational experience. And that's what I put also in the book, which I talked about earlier. The title of which, by the way, is God Talk. God Talk, Experiences of Humanity's Connection to the Divine.
I love that book so much because you were flipping your traditional dialogue and how you experience that to other people. And it's so empowering to see that and how that plays out in just common people everywhere. Because going back to a theme we talked about before, people feel really unsure or unworthy. Who am I to be having a conversation with God, and why would He talk to me? So then your book, it's really a wonderful example of how that can show up in your life and that you can do it too. And going back to your framework and your steps and the third part where you break it all down into how we can allow and create that space for us to have those conversations. I think it's wonderful. And if you can, for our listeners who are not familiar with the book, can you describe how God Talk can help someone move through those doubts and those questions and that discernment between ego and divinity?
Well, I think the first step is to understand that we're not calling messages down from up on high. We're not calling it down. We're calling it forth from deep within us. That's why it feels right when we experience the messages, because they're coming from deep within us. I have been made to understand that what we call God, or divinity, if you please, exists as part of every single sentient being in the cosmos. There is no separation between God and us, or between God and anything. All things are one thing. There's only one thing. And all things are part of the one thing there is. So the way we can come to a place of eliminating any doubt in our mind is, once again, to just go back to our innermost feeling. If anyone has ever said to you, another human being, if any other human being has ever said to you, I love you, you almost always know whether they're just putting you on or saying something because they want something from you or whatever, or whether they really and truly do love you. It's a feeling you have. So it's about listening to yourself. What I say to people is, give it what I call the tummy test. Because the tummy knows, your stomach knows for sure.
Yeah.
And it's really very simple. We can just go into a restaurant to have dinner. My wife and I went to a restaurant a few weeks ago to have dinner, and we didn't even get past the front door. We looked at each other and said, no, this doesn't feel like the place. We couldn't even explain why. It just didn't feel right to be in that particular place for dinner. So we got in our car and drove to a different restaurant. So, listen to yourself. To thine own self be true, and it follows as the night the day. Thou then canst not be false to any man. Bill wrote that, and he knew exactly what he was saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bill also said, to be or not to be. That is the question.
I resonate so much with that because it's truly one of those things where, and I've experienced this many times, and of course Christina, from her experience being a channel for angelic beings and whatnot, is it's when you start on this path, on this journey of discovery, it's the thing you have to wrestle with the most, those questions and those doubts, but trusting your inner knowing and that resonance and that expansiveness it's very important, and that's how you know you're on the right track.
Because you're on the right track if the message you're receiving feels like freedom, joy, and love. If it's anything less than total freedom, complete joy, and pure love, then it's coming from another source. But if it's coming from a divine source, you will feel it as freedom, joy, and love. This is what I was told, because I asked God, how can I tell the difference? And she said, Neale, it's really very simple. Freedom, joy, and love.
I love that. I've noticed that you refer to God as she, and I think usually historically people refer to God as he, and I'm curious to know more about that connection for you and how that came through for you and how you feel that essence.
Well, I think that but it's not surprising that most people think of God as a he, because most religions, now I'm not going to say most religions, I'm going to say all religions. Every religion on the face of the earth, and by the way, there are 4,223 of them currently being practiced on this planet. Every religion on the face of the earth says that God has a penis. Well, I thought, how do we know that? What if God had a vagina? Or what if God, for that matter, wasn't any particular sex, one way or the other? What if God was simply the essential essence, the purest energy that you could imagine, that takes whatever form that God knows that we can embrace and accept? In my own life, forgive me, ladies, but in my own life, I happen to think that the most loving, accepting, compassionate, patient, understanding, generous, emotionally generous, sensitive form that I've experienced is the form of a woman, female. Not that I haven't experienced some men who have those characteristics, but more often than not, it's a lady. My own wife is a perfect example. My wife is the kind of person who would do something that I never would have thought of doing. She'll spend 25 minutes saving the life of a spider. I'm not kidding. She'll see a spider on the kitchen counter and she'll grab a glass and try to catch it. She'll take her 5 minutes to catch the spider. Then she puts a piece of cardboard underneath the glass and she carries it outside. It might take her more than 5 minutes. It might take her 15 or 20 minutes. Then she releases, I watched her do this a couple of years ago, and she released the spider outside, put it on a leaf of a plant outside. She said, there you go, sweetheart. You don't want to be in this house. You want to be outside where you belong. And when she came back into the house, I looked at her and I said, you want to know why I love you? It's not because of what I get from you. It's what I see when I watch you across the room. It's the person you are. I don't love what I get. I love what I see.
That's so beautiful. Um, and I can relate. I'm very familiar with the catch and release. We also practice that in
I was
my.
also going to raise my hand. Yeah.
Don't do it myself, but I will ask my husband to catch in the future. I stumble upon and try and release it. But those acts of love, I think, are also God, and are also that energy that lives within us in a way. Um, I want to jump to something that I've always thought was very interesting from your books and your work. And because we talked about this all the time in the podcast when we talk about divine communication and why can't the divine or angels or just talk, just plain English or any language. But you've said over and over again that words are the least reliable form of communication.
Where are they ever?
Right. So how can we go beyond words in those conversations, and how do we interpret the signs and those other?
Well, by doing what I said a minute ago, we go beyond, the communication of words by listening and looking and watching carefully everything that's going on around us. Like, as I mentioned a while ago, like conversation at the coffee table next to me in the coffee shop. I mean, at the table next to me in the coffee shop. Well, those were words, but they weren't words being spoken to me. It was simply a coincidence that they were having a conversation like that, or a feeling, or a fragrance. So how we do is we move past the words are the least reliable form of communication. Boy, I've learned that in my life. I can say one thing across the room, and the person on the other side of the room hears it in an entirely different way. So I've learned to pick up the vibe. I experience the vibration, the energetic projection that's coming from the other person. And I have experienced that I can interpret more accurately exactly what they're trying to send me as their message by listening to or picking up the vibe of what they're projecting rather than listening to the words. Then I put the two together and I might come up with a clear understanding of their communication. So, watch. I'll give you, I hate to be so simplistic here, but a simple example. If a person stares me straight in the eye and looks directly at me, and then they adjust their glasses, and they may smile a little bit, then they're probably telling me the truth because I can feel the energy that comes off of their person. So if you want to know, ladies and gentlemen, whether Louisa or Christina are telling you something that makes sense, catch the vibe.
I
That's
love
it.
that. Yeah, simple as that. And I think that as we are immersed in listening to podcasts or reading books and having these conversations and being able to even just, I feel like even in this conversation, there's an energy here and what people are feeling and experiencing and listening to this. And so we're so grateful that there's people like you in the world who are bringing this forward and bringing people an opportunity to connect on a more deep level with God and with divine in its true form. And so when it comes to the future of spirituality, let's say, or the evolution of how we're connecting, how we are receiving, listening to God, what do you see in terms of what that might look like, or what you hope for humanity and how we evolve?
It's not even what I hope for, it's what I've been told point blank. in the book Conversations with God, Book 4, which carries the subtitle, Awaken the Species, we're given the answer to the question you just asked. We're told that our species is on track to evolve exponentially faster than we have ever in the past. We're moving forward with exponential speed in our evolutionary process. So what I see as the future of spirituality is that it's expanding more rapidly and further than ever, even in my own memory as a person. If someone had told me, for instance, when I was 15 years old, I'm an older guy. Okay, I'm an old geezer. So I'm 81 years old. But as an 81-year-old man, I can tell you, when I was 15 years old, if someone had said to me, no, you don't understand, Neale. When you're 81, you're going to be talking to thousands of people simultaneously on a screen in front of you because of the technology that will be developed between now and then. I would have thought that they were talking to me about science fiction, like some science fiction novel or something. Not going to happen in real life. But here we are. So our ability, just to use one example, our ability to expand our communication through technologies that didn't exist even a few years ago, that ability, we now have the ability to hold in the palm of our hand all the information in the universe. You just have to press a button on your telephone and ask any question, and the answer will come up for you. So because of our amazing advances in technology, we've made some amazing advances in understanding and in communicating the largest truths. I mean, Christina, you're doing it all the time. You're bringing through information and sharing it with others all the time. That wouldn't have been possible when I was your age. I mean, I know when I was 23, I couldn't even imagine such a thing.
Yeah. It's incredible and so powerful. And I absolutely see what you're saying with regards to just how quickly everything is evolving, and it seems like time is going faster too. That's my experience too with this is time seems to go by faster and everything is just rapidly expanding.
That's been my observation. And over the past 81 years, is it really, you wait until you're as old as I am, but when you're 80 or 81, it feels like you're 56. I don't feel like an old geezer trying to get through life. I thought that's how I would feel when I was 81, but that's not how I feel. Because of all the advancements that are being made in every area of life. Let me give you one final example. About 9 years ago, I had an interesting experience. I had a quintuple bypass, open heart surgery, which would have been thought of, again, I make the point, it wouldn't have been thought of when I was 15 years old. It simply wouldn't have been part of the possibility, and not for the average person, and hardly for anybody. But when I turned 72, there was the possibility. And when I came to after that operation, I remember what the heart surgeon said to me. Good job, he said. You just bought yourself 10 years.
Wow.
And here we are.
And here we are. So the future of spirituality is advancing incrementally and exponentially. And my hope for tomorrow is that we will move into a place where we finally begin to understand who we are, where we are, why we are where we are, and what we intend to do about that.
That's just fascinating. And I think because the world seems to be moving so fast, and we barely have a chance to process and understand what's happening. There's from AI to war on any given day. We're just bombarded with so much information. So stopping and tuning into God and allowing space for his voice to come through seems to be more and more challenging today than ever before.
Unless it's not. Unless it's not more and more challenging. Unless we design our life deliberately in such a way that, if you only stop just for 10 seconds. I was given this wonderful, wonderful tool. God said, Neale, you don't need to have a 2-hour meditation somewhere. You don't need to, Neale, 10 seconds. Just stop whatever you're doing, maybe even in the middle of a sentence somewhere, and just stop. For 10 blessed seconds. Shut the hell up. I mean, shut the hell up and let yourself experience who you truly are
Yeah.
and what is true about the whole experience we're having. Then share that experience in the way you touch the lives of others. Normally, at the end of an interview, the final question I'm asked is, Neale, what is another one of God's most important messages to the world?
That's the question.
Oh, did you mean to ask that question?
Yes, you read my mind.
Strange you should ask.
Yeah.
She said to me, Neale, your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that your life is about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it, you will then experience that in a universal sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. There's nobody else in the room. We are all one.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Such a beautiful way to bring a close to this conversation, even though I wish we could continue talking for another hour. And we just want to say thank you so much, Neale, for spending your time with us today and sharing these beautiful truths and this light and this love with us and with everyone who's listening. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so and for the joy of spending this time with both of you. Blessed be.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor and a dream come true to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. And I know our listeners are going to take so many things away from this conversation. So I'm so glad we got to spend this time together.
I am too. Bye for now.